Guess what, everyone? Nokia's finally come out with an Android phone. And in an ironic twist, it did so just 2 months before it merged with Microsoft. So instead, I shall say, good news everyone, Microsoft's finally come out with an Android phone. But Nokia's been invested in Windows Phone, so you might ask why there's a sudden interest in using a competing platform. This phone, which is called the X, is a low-end phone that's geared towards first-time smartphone buyers in emerging markets. The next billion users, as Nokia likes to call it. The Lumia 520 is already pretty cheap, but this one is even more affordable, so that way anyone who can't afford a Windows phone will at least have access to Microsoft's ecosystem in some way or another. Since it's a very cheap phone, don't expect a lot of great specs. It's got a low-res screen and camera, basic dual-core processor, just half a gig of RAM, and very little internal storage space, although microSD comes included. Well, the slot that is not the actual card. It gets the job done for anyone who only needs basic internet access, and a handful of simple Android apps. But any heavy lifting simply will not work. With that said, it had difficulty with even simple tasks. The design itself is minimal, but it looks better than many similar phones at the same price. It also has a removable plastic back, so you can replace the battery, micro SD card, or SIM cards. On the software side, the X is rather unique. Its style is somewhat similar to most Chinese Android phones, in that it only has access to the standard Android open source platform, and you can't get Google services on it. Instead, you get a curated app store, Nokia's core apps, and Microsoft services. But you can sideload and download most Android apps. Many first-time users likely won't care about Google or extra apps and will be perfectly happy with the selection that's currently available. In fact, even if you can't find the app you want, the Nokia store will provide you with third-party app stores to search. And, in my experience, that worked 95% of the time. The X has a tile-based app launcher on a vertically scrolling screen. Yes, just like on Windows Phone. But since it's on Android, you don't get the live tiles. While the tiles can be resized, most don't actually add any value when they're enlarged, except for certain apps like the photo gallery. You can put apps in folders, add widgets, and heck, you can even use regular Android launchers if you prefer the standard look. Now, swipe to the left or the right, and you'll find the Fast Lane, which is a carryover from Asha. Fast Lane combines a recent apps menu with a notification bar. So it's actually a pretty interesting viewpoint, but the problem is you can't actually access it unless you swipe left or right from the home screen or the launcher. So in other words, you can't truly multitask from any apps. Now on a positive note, unwanted apps or notifications can be filtered out, so you can make it only for stuff that's important to you. Swiping down from the top reveals a basic quick settings menu, but the only use I found for it was a button that took me into the regular settings. Whenever the phone screen is off, the X has a glance screen much like on Lumia phones, and a double tap is going to wake the phone up. Of course, the glance screen didn't always work the way it should, and double taps were even less reliable. Battery life is pretty good, as long as you're not trying to tax the processor with intense games, or video playback, or any other similar activities. Those just end up being a little too much for the X, unfortunately. Now, I was able to get over a full day of use out of it this way, despite the fact that it uses a 1500 mAh battery. For the $120 that you're paying, the X is not a horrible device. In fact, I think that most people would get along with it just fine. But it's also on shaky ground right now for several reasons. First, it doesn't have the full suite of Google services, while Samsung and other companies have comparable Android phones that do. The ecosystem is pretty limited right now, and the fact that it's now owned by Microsoft makes me uncertain about whether or not it will continue to be supported in the coming months, despite Microsoft's claim that it will. Not only that, it simply underperforms for its price range. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not expecting it to be as good as a flagship or really anything close to it. But there were just too many times in which the X was not usable as a smartphone whatsoever. If you're interested in the X, it's still rolling out to various markets around the world. It won't be officially coming to the US, unfortunately, but if you're in other countries, be on the lookout, and hopefully it'll be coming your direction if it's not already there.
The portal master, the player,
Sure.
the ability to reach through the portal and reverse the magic of Skylanders and actually grab digital characters out of Skylands and pull them